started the month off undefeated, lose 2 straight to the Dodgers. Now they get ready for the Cincinnati Reds. To join us, talk more about the Phillies as they at least don't get swept, at least a little positivity coming out of the series. Joining us right now to talk more about the Phillies is our Phillies insider, Frank Klose, who joins us right now on the stream. You can see him on YouTube and Twitter. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Josh?
Doing pretty good. So at least the Phillies didn't get swept. I think that's kind of the the takeaway. But Frank, I said it earlier this week, and I want to ask you about this. Frank, to me, I looked at it like this. Frank, I figured they were going to lose the Max Scherzer game. To me, I felt like they were going to lose that game all along. To me, it was the middle game that kind of bit them, right? It was the rain delay. It was trying to put Gibson after the rain delay. Didn't 100% work out. So we knew, at least in my opinion, I think the Dodgers are the best team in the National League. So you knew this wasn't going to be some like walkover series. So what do we take away from losing 2 of 3 to what I think is the best team in the National League?
Well, I said on Tuesday, I thought the Phillies would be okay if they win 1 out of the 3. Now, you would have hoped that maybe the Gibson start or the Nola start would turn out a little bit better. And today, Ranger Suarez looked really, really good. But, of course, he's still building that pitch count up, still building that stamina up. Couldn't give you the innings that another starter might. And it was really important that they won this one. And I will say this, I've always wondered for years why managers didn't try to play the weather forecast and maybe hold off a starter when it was obvious that a line of thunderstorms is coming into the area. And so I like that Joe Girardi did that. I think that did help a little bit today, because when you think about it, the Dodgers and the Phillies both had to deal with that weather 2 nights in a row, right? But the difference was the Dodgers had to go to their bullpen early 2 nights in a row. The Phillies got more out of their starter, their real starter last night in Kyle Gibson, and that maybe gave the Phillies an edge today, because then the Braves, why do I keep saying Braves? I guess my Braves are on my mind. The Dodgers had to rely on their bullpen a lot more today, and even though it was only a couple of runs they gave up, that made the difference. The Dodgers are a very, very good team, and the Phillies were able to eke that out.
Well, maybe you had the Braves on the mind because we know with the Phillies with a half-game lead, the Braves, they basically start playing, like 6 minutes? With the Reds, and the Reds are the team the Phillies play next. So maybe that's why you're thinking that.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to talk about the Braves anyway.
Right. We'll also talk about the Reds, too, because, listen, it doesn't get easier offensively, right? You go from a Dodgers team that has a lot of huge names to a Reds team that arguably is just good of an offense. I mean, Castellanos, Winkler, Votto, they got a bunch of studs in that lineup. So the offensive issue is not going to get any easier for the next 3 days.
Yeah, they will have to keep those bats at bay, but the Phillies and the Reds have been kind of comparable throughout the season. In fact, I think if you compare the records, the Phillies would be like a game behind the Reds. And the Reds are one of those teams that are kind of hanging in contention, maybe for a wild card, maybe not. Probably not at this point. I think they've fallen far enough down, but they're definitely not a team you can take lightly. And the Phillies are going to face their 3 best starters. Now, of those 3, Luis Castillo not having his best year, but they will get to face Sonny Gray, which he's not the Sonny Gray that has been in the past for Oakland, but they're facing a decent Sonny Gray as well. So I think that the Phillies really need to. Really need to put up some offense against some tough starting pitching, and hopefully they'll have JT Realmuto to do that, because I think the lineup really could use having JT in that lineup.
You mentioned JT. The good news came out today. No concussion. He doesn't have to go on the concussion list or anything like that. So do we expect to see him at least Friday, Saturday as a starter?
It sounds like he got fully cleared, so he should be in that lineup against Tyler Mahle tomorrow. I would expect. And by the way, Knapp did get a little banged up on his one at bat, and he did come out and catch again. So we were kind of wondering if we would see JT at the end there for a little bit, but we'll see. If the Phillies make a roster move and bring Marchand back, then you kind of know something's up. But I thought it was pretty telling that even last night I was kind of paying attention to the game in Lehigh Valley. Even after JT had exited, Marchand stayed in that entire game for the Iron Pigs. So The Phillies didn't call up to Lehigh Valley and say, "Hey, get Marshawn down here just in case." So I tended to think that was a good sign as well.
Frank Klose joining us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Phillies salvage the series with the Dodgers, win 1 out of 3, and they're now looking ahead to the Cincinnati Reds. Frank, one of the things that I think a lot of people are frustrated right now, and I got to ask you about this when it comes to the Phillies, is Alec Bohm. I got to admit, I was not a huge fan of just throwing him in there at first base in the middle of this past series, and I feel like, listen, if you want to go into an entire offseason and say, hey, Alec, you're going to play first base next year, we're going to trade Rhys Hoskins or whatever in the offseason, that's fine. But in the middle of a pennant race against the Dodgers, you throw him at first base, that felt, I don't know, a little irresponsible, shall I call it?
He did okay last year, but quite honestly, he was as good at first base as he was at third base.
That's not saying much.
I know, but I guess the issue is that the left side of the infield's been a problem. So they thought maybe, he would have it a little bit easier playing on the right side of the infield, where there are fewer lefty hitters than there are righty hitters, and maybe that would have been better. I kind of wondered early on that if Hoskins would be out for a while, would you get Bohm off of third base? But I think yesterday he kind of proved that that's not so much better either. I see Alec Bohm being their left fielder next year. That's something I'm still believing is going to be the case. But like today, he could not be in the lineup. He has actually been playing pretty well lately. So I forget who tweeted it out, but they said, well, he's had a quiet, good bat the last couple months, and unfortunately, he's had a loud glove the last couple months. And so today was a must-win game for the Phillies. You just could not put him in there. You could not deal with any more errors that lead to runs and extend the outings of pitchers, especially given all the rain the last couple days. So they had to go with Torreyes there, and Torreyes had a big hit today. He drove in one of those 2 runs, so that was very, very important. But I think you're going to see Bohm on the bench more as time goes on, just because, especially when Freddie Galvis joins the team. Galvis and Torreyes are going to play a lot on that left side of that infield, I believe.
What is the status of Galvis? I know that he's pretty close to coming back, right?
Yeah, they've been saying that, but he hasn't begun a rehab assignment or anything. I would imagine he would play a few games with either Reading or Lehigh Valley first. So I guess once we know he's headed somewhere, then we know he's getting really close.
Frank Klose joining us here, Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, at Frank Klose on Twitter. Of course, the Phillies mailbag every Tuesday on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Phillies finish off this series, get 1 win against the Dodgers. And Frank, I keep mentioning, I think the Dodgers are the best team in baseball. Someone messaged the show saying that he thinks we need to be more positive about the Phillies winning against the Dodgers because they're such a good team. What is your reaction to that? Do you think we're not being positive enough?
Well, see, I the shame of this series was there was a really good pitchers duel on Tuesday night with Scherzer and Nola, both going toe to toe, striking out a lot of guys, no runs allowed, and then the rain messed that up. So, I kind of give this series a pass, just because then when you get back off of that, I realized the Phillies were only down a run after Hammer gave up, which I think was his first run of the year, but they kind of went to the B part of their bullpen on Tuesday, and I feel like it kind of had to. Just because that the Dodgers are that good, and so he could save his ace arms like Archie Bradley, who got today's win for later on to try to win those games. So it's tough. I think the rain messed this one up enough that you're happy you got 1 out of 3. You prefer they get 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3, but. I think this is okay. I think this is one that Mother Nature just kind of screwed up in a lot of ways, and so we'll see how they do against the Reds. Again, a team that's decent, probably kind of competitively matched to the Phillies. I think that'll tell you a little bit more than this past series against the Dodgers.
Yeah, you mentioned about the Reds. They have a little better record than the Phillies. I think the Reds are the best team in baseball that will make the postseason, in my opinion, because they're 5-6 games behind the Brewers. I don't think they win the wild card unless the Padres or Giants completely collapse and fall apart. I don't see the Reds getting in the wild card. So the Reds, while they think they're fighting for a playoff spot, the Phillies are fighting for 2. So like you said, this is going to be a series that you're going to find out, where the Phillies think of themselves in terms of their ability to execute. Because realistically, I would put it this way. You made the additions you made at the deadline, right? With the idea that you got to go out and beat a team like the Reds to keep the ball rolling to try to win the National League East.
And the Phillies are pitching Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler in this series. Now, the middle game on Saturday, unfortunately, they're going with the Matt Moore, maybe kind of TBD starter. It seems like it'll be Matt Moore, but he's the only lefty in the bullpen right now. So Saturday is a little bit iffy. But when you have Zach Wheeler on the mound, yeah, again he's going to face the Reds' best starter tomorrow. But then you have Aaron Nola on Sunday. In fact, I'm interested in seeing more Aaron Nola, as good as he's looked the last two times out. I mean, you kept wondering for a while which Aaron Nola you would see. Hopefully, he's into a groove and he can help the Phillies take a key game here because, even though Zach Wheeler's your best pitcher, you can't take for granted they're going to win all the time. Again, they're facing the Reds' best pitcher. But yeah, it depends how these. The funny thing about these series is, you're kind of as good as your starters that you throw for that series. So, Phillies didn't throw Wheeler in this series, but they will next series, and then Nola will appear as well. So, they can kind of hang with anybody with those guys on the mound, no matter what team it is. And it's good they're getting them against the Reds rather than the Diamondbacks, and then you'll see that they're back around for the Padres series.
You mentioned Aaron Nola. I can't get out of my mind when Dombrowski said that it was a mechanical issue. Remember that was about a month ago about Aaron Nola? And since the All-Star break, he's had 5 starts. He has a 3.72 ERA, which isn't horrible. Not great, but guess what? His batting average against is 185. So, yeah, he's allowed a few runs, but it's not like the hitters are getting a lot of contact off of him. So you could argue that, yeah, the Phillies are only 1-1 for him as a starter in those 5 starts, so he's getting the decision. But you know what? Maybe he's figured out the mechanical issues that Dombrowski talked about.
Yeah, that's very fair. I mean, we all knew that he was better than what we were seeing, right? Aaron Nola has enough of a track record that, and I learned this from Larry Boa, who used to talk about looking at a guy's baseball card at the end of the season, right? The back of the baseball card, you kind of know where you're going to be. Some years will be better than others, but you expected that at some point Aaron Nola would not be a pitcher with a 4.5 ERA, and so he's kind of getting back on track. And these are long seasons. Last year was a really tough season for everybody, and so maybe he got knocked off his game a little bit, but it's definitely encouraging for the Phillies that Nola's been looking a lot better lately, and really just the fact that he was stepping up against the Dodgers against Max Scherzer, I think that was a good sign, and it's just really a shame that rain kind of got in the way of that one.
Yeah, and also the fact that he has 3 straight no decisions. So you look at him and Wheeler, you take out their win-loss record, look at all the other numbers. They're both pitching. I mean, Wheeler's pitching amazing, but Nola's pitching well. So I think sometimes people get enamored with the win-loss record when it comes to pitchers and not look at the other things because guess what? The Phillies won the game that Nola allowed 5 runs in. So, and they lost the last game when him and Scherzer were dueling because of the rain delay. So you could argue that, sometimes things happen. They're out of pitcher's control. And that, like I said, if Nola's got a 185 batting average against since the All-Star break, I think he's figured something out. And I'm a lot more confident in him heading down the stretch here.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And let's remember, too, one thing to look at with these numbers, too, is the defense and how the defense has let them down on a regular basis. And every time you need to add a couple extra outs every game, that makes a huge difference on your final line. So I can see him getting better, even if the stat line doesn't say so. That's fine. And by the way, the pitcher with the second most wins, tied with Aaron Nola right now, is Archie Bradley. So, we're kind of past the wins and losses, and by the way, which is a sign that Bradley's kept them in a lot of games in the middle innings. But we're in an era now where the wins and losses often go to those middle inning guys because you don't pitch that long anymore.
Speaking of pitching that long, what do you think about Ranger Suarez today? I thought that it was nice to see him get a little deeper into the game, get a little more stretched out. You saw he was a little more efficient in the first few innings. I got to say, I like what I saw from Suarez today.
Yeah, Suarez seemed to run out of gas a little bit in the 5th inning. They kind of hoped they would get him through that 5th inning. And the unfortunate thing is a wild pitch from Enyel De Los Santos led to that 1 earned run that Suarez gave up. If De Los Santos was able to get that keep that runner at second base, he might not have scored. So he looked really good. He was striking out some guys. He did walk a couple, but you can see that he's building back up into a starter. And they were hoping he would go somewhere into the 70s in terms of pitches. Suarez ended up getting over the 80 mark, and so once that happened, and he had a couple base runners, it seemed kind of clear he was kind of losing that steam. So, looking forward to seeing what he'll do when he has a more extended outing. I'm sure they'll let him loose a little bit more at each time out, and then hopefully in a start or two, he'll be at the point where he can just pitch until he pitches. Obviously 100 has sort of become the magic number of pitches in Major League Baseball, but he's getting pretty close to that. So hopefully he can give them five or six good innings every time. I mean, he's looked very good, and he's if the Phillies make the playoffs, he's going to be a big part of that, because whatever role they've given him, he's just excelled in it. Whether it be long man, closer, or starter. His ERA is 1.07. I mean, the fact that he's had all those roles and still manages to keep the runs from scoring and keep his cool. He's such a level-headed guy, just goes about his business. And the thing that really opened my eyes for him this year was that game in Miami, and that was kind of where the Phillies started to turn around a little bit. He comes in for Spencer Howard in the third inning, the bases loaded, no outs, and Suarez just gets to business and gets him out of that jam. The Phillies come back and win. So pretty impressive what he has done for the Phillies this season, and hopefully the longer that he can pitch in games, the more and more impact he'll actually have.
So then, with that being said, what we've seen from Ranger this year, how does that translate into the Phillies' future plans? Because obviously, if he's able to be this pitcher you can rely on, do you go into next year saying we want to turn him into a full-time starter again? Do we want to maybe put him back in the bullpen? What do you think the Phillies should do with him long-term?
It's a good question. I think he wants to start, and he's certainly earning his way into being considered to be a starter. But as we know, in Major League Baseball, you don't go a season with 5 starters. So, the Phillies will have Wheeler back, well, unless they make any moves, of course. It stands that Wheeler will be back, Nola will be back, Gibson will be back. They still control Zach Eflin. And so is Suarez that 5th guy going forward? Who knows? You always want some more depth than that. And, is he willing to let his role sort of be fluid? I mean, he seems to be okay with wherever they're going to let him pitch, right? But, I think that's something he wants to do. And he doesn't have that many starts left to prove it, but I'm sure if he gets 5 or 6 starts that are full starts, he might have to make them seriously think about including him in the plans. But it's always good to have extra, and so we'll see what happens in the offseason. The Phillies probably will have to add a starter of some sort, just because you need that depth. And this year they added a couple extras, and with Moore and Anderson, and we've seen how that's worked out, right? So, and of course Spencer Howard was part of the equation, and Vince Velasquez was part of the equation. This bunch is probably better than those 4, but just get as many in there as you possibly can. So, double headers and other issues that come up. Hopefully, no injuries, but you need more than that. So, whether he is counted on as number 5 or number 6, he's probably going to pitch a lot. It'll probably start a lot. So, but this is his chance to show he belongs. And by the way, last spring, a lot of people forget, before the shutdown, Ranger Suarez was pretty poised to beat out Vince Velasquez and Nick Pivetta for that 5th starter job. And then the shutdown happened, and then right as they were reporting to summer camp, Suarez got COVID and was stuck in his hotel room and couldn't really. It took him a long time to get his strength back, and kind of last year was a lost year. But before before the world shut down, Suarez was looking pretty good and poised to be a starter. So hopefully a combination in that. And what we see out of him going forward can help the Phillies make a good decision.
Frank Klose joining us here on the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN covers the Phillies for 97.3 ESPN.com, at Frank Klose on Twitter. Of course, the Phillies mailbag every Tuesday at 2:40 here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Phillies win 2-1 today. Avoid the sweep from the Dodgers by winning that game today. Ranger Suarez did start today. Now, you mentioned about on Saturday, speaking of starters, the whole Matt Moore amalgamation with the bullpen thing going on. So, do we have any updates on the other guys? We know that guys like Eflin and Velasquez and Anderson, they're unavailable right now. So, Is there any update on if or when any of those guys might return?
The ones that sound like they're our closest now. Of course, Brogdon was a surprise return yesterday, which was great. Which by the way, I think that's a sign that the Phillies could surprise us a little bit because they didn't send him on a rehab assignment, but so they might be willing to do that if they really feel like they are that desperate. I will say this too. One sign though is they added David Paulino from Lehigh Valley today, and to do that, they sent Sam Coonrod to the 60-day injured list. So it sounds like Coonrod is not anywhere close to returning. Some good news is Bailey Falter began his rehab assignment with Lehigh Valley, so he should make an appearance tonight. So I'll be keeping an eye on that to see how he does. That would be a big boost to this bullpen, which if Matt Moore starts, they have no lefties in. And then, Zach Eflin, he's throwing a little bit, and he says his knees feel strong, so he could be a rehab assignment away from joining the Phillies soon. And then on top of that, Sir Anthony Dominguez, who all along I kind of said was a big wild card if they happen to get to see him this year. He's looked pretty good so far in his minor league rehab appearances, and he's with Reading right now. He made 3 appearances for the Jersey Shore Blue Claws. I got to get used to saying Jersey Shore and not Lakewood. But he looked pretty good in those, but he's going to kind of move up the ladder, and we'll kind of see where that goes. So it seems like the Phillies have a lot of reinforcements not that far away. It's just hopefully they can get them sooner than later. But I think certainly Falter and Dominguez, they need those rehab appearances, and I'm sure Eflin would take one too. But the fact that they got Brogdon back right away, that was a huge boost to this Phillies team.
Now, speaking of boosts to the team, we saw that McCutchen came back this week. We know that he is back and at it. He's good to go moving forward. Really nice catch yesterday. What is the status of some of the other injuries? I know Hoskins has jumped on the injury list. We mentioned Freddie Galvis. We don't know about him yet, but I want to ask you about Rhys Hoskins because I'm assuming that that's a guy that they could really use in this lineup, and he's been productive. He's had a really good season offensively.
Yeah, so his groin has a strain, and it sounded like over a couple days ago when they put him on the IL, they were working him out with the doctor to try to figure out if he'd be ready to go or not, and they decided to. It seemed like they decided to err on the side of caution. So they expect this IL stint to be the minimum 10 days, and that he could be back on Tuesday against Arizona in Phoenix. So the good news is you'll get Hoskins back. He won't be around for the Red Series, but he could be back for the Diamondback series. So, by the way, that would be huge too, because then it frees up Brad Miller to perhaps maybe play a little outfield or fill in wherever else you need. Because when they were without McCutchen and they were without Hoskins, your I guess your super sub there couldn't do both positions at once. So that'll be huge as well. So it sounds very promising then that this team is kind of coming back together quickly, and they will need everybody to be back together. Now, the Dodger series was a tough one with those injuries, but it sounds like in the next week or two they could be getting some back. I'm really interested in seeing what Sir Anthony Dominguez looks like in the major leagues because, again, total wild card.
Now, you mentioned the next 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks are interesting because if you include the Red Series, that means they only have 3 of the next 7 series versus teams that are playoff teams, right? You get the Reds for 3 games, the Padres on the road, and then Diamondbacks for 2 at home. The D-Rays at home, the Tampa Bay Rays. You want to call them the Devil Rays? Well, they were wearing the Devil Ray uniforms 2 weeks ago. They had this thing. They had this thing 2 weeks ago that confused me out of nowhere. Like, oh, we're wearing Devil Ray uniforms again. I'm like, wait, they still had those uniforms? But anyway.
They wore them when the Phillies played in Tampa.
Yeah, I don't understand. Is it like Devil Rays Day like every month, like one day a month? Like I don't know what's going on down there in Tampa. But still, they're a playoff team. They're I think they're leading the AL East right now. So you only have 3 of the next 7 series that are against playoff teams, so they have a chance to at least keep building on their what is currently a half-game lead in the NL East.
Well, I would say be careful because the Atlanta Braves, their schedule, it looks pretty easy for the next few series. They face the Nationals, the Marlins, and the Orioles. So they've got 9 games against teams they very much should win, before facing the Yankees, Giants, and Dodgers. So the Phillies really need to take care of business in this upcoming stretch, because at least if you're just going team by team, the Phillies will. Phillies do face the Diamondbacks 7 times in the next few weeks, but the Braves do have pretty much a comparable schedule. So I'm not one who thinks that the Phillies have an advantage with their schedule. I think the Braves and Phillies both kind of have the same kind of road ahead of them. So I would be I'd be very, very careful to take these games lightly, or just because the Phillies need these W's, because the Braves, at least on paper, should pick up a lot of W's the next few weeks as well.
Sure, and now it also should be noted that the Mets don't have as easy of a schedule, because I believe they're playing with the Dodgers and Giants in back-to-back series. So the Mets could sink, but the Braves will still be hanging around, correct?
Yeah, I think the Mets will sink. The Mets go Giants, Dodgers, Giants. It's like a stretch of like 10 games against those 3 teams in a row. The Braves do face the Giants. They do face the Padres in September. So they the schedule will come around that they play a lot of these same teams. But I think the Mets, they did win last couple games. I don't think much of the Mets. I think we've seen the peak of the Mets, and again, not to take them lightly, but I think the Phillies and Braves will be the 2 teams that come down to it at the end. And you look at the schedule, the Phillies and Braves play each other to the second to last series, so that could be a really big game when the Phillies head to Atlanta and face the Braves. That last week of September, it could all come down to that.
He is Frank Klose. Give him a follow on Twitter at Frank Klose on Twitter. The Phillies mailbag is every Tuesday on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, as the Phillies are getting ready for a 3-game set with the Reds before they hit a little West Coast trip to take on Arizona and San Diego. And Frank will keep you covered with all the Phillies over there on Twitter at Frank Klose, as well as over at 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Frank, always appreciate you jumping on and giving us some more insight into the Phillies, as, hey, man, they got 1 away from the Dodgers. It's better than none, right?
1 is better than none, but I think 1 out of 3 against the Dodgers, they can move forward and withstand that. That shouldn't be a problem.
Great stuff, Frank. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.